So thanks for everyone for sticking by and attending the talk. I'll talk about red team tips again. I was once known for the red team tips, and now I'll talk about red team tips again. I've come back out. I think I haven't spoken for around 3 years now, and now I got invited to Athens, so I'm here speaking and sharing with you guys today. Quick disclaimer, of course, with all my talks, I always like to have a disclaimer because everything that I share in the presentation, if you want to take the knowledge, you use it in any way you want. I'm not liable for anything that you do with the information. So if it works for you, it's great. You can take advantage of it. But if it doesn't work for you, I'm not going to be liable for the technique not working, etc. So just keep that in mind. Evaluate, and if you want to use the information, then use it. So I'm Vincent Yu. I'm a red teamer penetration tester, founder of Science Security. We're based out of Hong Kong. I used to be the red team director for Deloitte in Hong Kong. I also worked in the UK for various red team and penetration testing firms as well. More commonly known as the red team tips guy on Twitter, like I just mentioned. Maybe around 2016, 2017 time, there was a point in time on Twitter where there was just this guy churning out loads of red team tips at one point in time. That was me. The reason why I was doing a lot of red team tips back then was because I wanted to share my experiences when performing red team engagements. Because at that time I realized not everyone in the industry has the day-to-day sort of experience with red teaming, because a lot of the time we're doing penetration tests, we're doing build reviews, config reviews, etc., all of the other types of security testing, but not everyone gets full-blown red team exercise experience. So at that time, I just thought, okay, it's great, we should share more information with everyone else so they can also acknowledge and learn from these types of red team ideas and information as well. I've also spoken at various conferences in the past. I've also got a few CVEs under my belt, but usually we don't report the 0 days anymore. We always keep it private under NDA with the customers, so I'm not really a fan of reporting CVEs. So this talk isn't about super cool new EDR bypasses or VPN exploits, etc. It's more about talking about challenges in red teaming that we've noticed over the past couple of years. Things that we failed at, things that we've had to overcome, and also how we've incorporated generative AI into our operations. So you might have heard a lot about ChatGPT, and people talk about generating images and video, etc. It might sound a lot like hype, right? So it might not be real, right? But we've actually been able to utilize a lot of generative AI in our red team campaigns, etc., to help streamline our operations as well. So we'll share a little bit about the practical usages in our red team engagements, and hopefully it can help you guys as well. And also for red team infrastructure as well. I know a lot of people running internal red teams, or they're running a small consulting business. They need to be able to secure their red team infrastructure. So we'll talk a little bit about how we've set up our red team infrastructure, how we have the whole setup in place, what types of systems we have in place. So you can maybe use it as reference if you're building out your own red team as well. So what types of issues occur during the red team exercise? So I'm not going to talk about the new generation types of red teaming, like SaaS red team or cloud red team. I'm talking more about the traditional type of red team here. More of the case where, typical network, you will have a corporate network where all of the users and the regular internal systems will be. And then we also have maybe the DMZ with the external internet-facing systems, which is segregated off. You may also have a secure zone. So for example, if you're a financial institution, you may have a secure zone that has maybe like the SWIFT network, which is separated from the main corporate network. Or if you're a cardholder, if you're taking cardholder payment data, you may have a PCI DSS requirements to have a separated network as well, right? So there's usually a secure zone in a lot of these traditional enterprises. So this is typically what we see for organizations, maybe like in airports or energy companies, construction companies, financial institutions. This is typically the type of network that we still see today. The majority of our red teams are still red teaming these traditional businesses with this type of common setup. So typically, whenever we break in as the red team via the internet, usually it's via either targeted phishing attack. So we phish the employee in a targeted phishing attack. We break inside and get into the employee's laptop, and then we can pivot inside the internal network. Or maybe there's a web attack or some type of infrastructure attack where we can then break into the DMZ and then pivot into the corporate network. Other types of attacks that we usually do in red teaming as well is maybe like the physical intrusions or the close proximity attacks as well. So there are many cases where we've done physical intrusions where we have to walk into the office, or maybe we break into a data center. So we've done these types of intrusion vectors as well. I think the majority and the most cost-effective way for breaking into an organization is always via the phishing or the web and infrastructure attacks. Usually the physical intrusions, it's a bit more risky. You turn up on site, your face is all over the CCTV cameras, so suddenly if they want to trace back the CCTV, they'll see your face on the camera. So usually there's a lot more risk with the physical intrusions. But typically, the targeted phishing attacks and the web and infrastructure attacks is exactly what we see all the time. Nowadays, the ransomware threat actors, they're always using the, maybe like a VPN exploit, or they're trying to do some phishing. And this is exactly what we're replicating here for our clients as well when we're testing their environments. So typically, after you break into the organization, you'll be looking to pivot around and move laterally, and then eventually escalate privileges, etc., and then get into the secure zone. This is typically what we see in a normal red team engagement, right? So today I'll talk a little bit more about the targeted phishing attacks, because I've heard a lot of bad news these days in the industry where everyone is moving into an assumed breach approach because they think the phishing is no longer valuable, it's too difficult to break through the phishing controls. A lot of the time they're not successful in the phishing. So we'll talk a bit about the tips and the sort of setup that we have in place, at least at Siren right now, the things that we're using to make it no longer an issue. We always get in via the phishing. Okay, maybe not always, maybe around 80% of the time we get in via the phishing. So we'll talk a little bit about the setup that we have. So if you want to replicate it, you can utilize it as well. And then hopefully you can also be successful in your phishing engagement. So talk a little bit about phishing. It's always great when we're talking to the customer. Let's say I'm talking to the CISO, the CISO. They're always like, you'll definitely get in, we already know about it. We do phishing training and phishing campaigns all the time with our own employees. Around 30% of the people are clicking on the phishing links, you'll definitely get in. This is what I always hear, right? But what could go wrong, right? When we're doing the phishing, there's security controls in place. There's things like Proofpoint, Mimecast, there's Microsoft's ATP with the sandboxes as well. There's all of these types of security controls in place that we have to bypass before we can actually get in as a external adversary. And then we always hear the phrase, when we fail at the phishing or when we don't get the phishing emails through, basically they will say, so how come your emails don't work? Our phishing training solution works. Well, I always have to explain to them, your phishing training solution, you're whitelisting your phishing emails. So that's why it gets through to your employees, right? But we, as the red team, we have to bypass all of these controls. You're not whitelisting our emails. We have to bypass these controls, right? So this is exactly what I'm going to talk about today, and you guys can take the information as well. So usually with phishing, we have issues with reputation checks on the campaigns. Usually, we also have words and adjectives and the nature of the email, which also checks whether it's malicious or not, or if it goes to the spam, or if it goes to the sandboxing as well. So usually around the email contents or the subject, if there's specific combinations of words as well, I think there's a bit of the AI machine learning vector layer as well, especially with Office 365. There's specific combinations of words where you're more likely to go into maybe like promotions or marketing or maybe just outright phishing, right? Because of the types of words that you're using in the email as well. We also utilize the ChatGPT, I'll say later on as well, to basically reword the entire email so it has the same sort of meaning, but then without specific words. So previously, if it blacklists certain words, like click this link here, you can change the wording altogether. It helps you reword it without you having to think. And then it can bypass certain wording and phrasing in emails as well. The sender IP address is also quite important, of course. Some of the SMTP servers, it will reveal your IP address. So if your IP address is blacklisted, then obviously the email is not going to go through. We haven't had these types of issues so far. When we do the phishing, we utilize trusted SMTP servers. So usually that's not even the thing that sort of blocks us most of the time. The thing that really annoyed us over the past few years was the sandboxing. So when we send an email through to an Office 365 tenant, basically it will take the link, it will crawl through the link. Even if it's just a website, it has some JavaScript, it crawls through the link, it tries to emulate it, it grabs the malware payload, and then it will run it in the sandbox. So we've seen that many, many times. That's the most annoying part of the equation, the thing that we're trying to solve here. So we've had to come up with a solution to solve this issue. We always have a bad day when, I don't know if everyone's seen this. If you're in red teaming, you might have seen this before. Basically, you have a C2 server, you have an XE running. Suddenly, it gets uploaded to VirusTotal or a Sandbox. You have John PC, and all of these fake connections come in, and that becomes your bad day because you've got all of these bogus, useless connections in your C2 server. We've also had many cases where we have people scanning our infrastructure or searching our infrastructure for common things. So here we had a complaint from Netcraft because we were purporting to be Microsoft. So they sent us a complaint. We'll talk a little bit about Cloudflare and how they help us later on as well. Random threat intel bros. You have a lot of these on Twitter. People just scanning the internet for Cobalt Strike servers, for Havoc servers, C2 servers, phishing servers, and other things as well. This is quite bad. If your infrastructure ever lands on any of these lists on the internet, immediately it's going to be blacklisted. Your IP is going to be blacklisted. It's not going to be useful anymore. They're immediately going to end up on a threat intel list, and then your C2 is going to be blocked. So we have to also bypass these. These are not related to us, so we don't know whether these IP addresses are malicious or not, so it's not related to us. We only just take these samples from Twitter, so just so that you know. So the thing that we utilized in the end to basically fix this issue altogether was Cloudflare. I think there's been quite a lot of pros and cons of using Cloudflare over the years, but we've settled with using Cloudflare as the core technology on how we're bypassing all of these controls. So you can maybe check it out as well. So I think when we're implementing the use of Cloudflare to bypass all of these sandboxes, we had pretty much 3 levels of implementation. The first level was just to utilize the firewall rules and the WAF security rules to basically block off certain connections. The level 2 was using workers. You'll see why this is useful later on. And then level 3 was a combination of using the WAF rules and also the workers in a multi-layered approach. So in Cloudflare's WAF solution, it's quite useful because it allows you to implement a variety of rules. So you can see here there's a WAF, it's different rules you can implement. You can implement a JS challenge rule. So this is basically when you access the website, you get this nice loading thing that spins around a little bit before it gives you access to the website. It's usually used to block automated scanners. And then maybe you can also use the block rule to block off the access completely as well. We've implemented the rules in certain orders. We have our reasons. I won't share too much, but you can also see in the examples here right now as well. So you can see here we're blocking off certain ASN numbers, specific network blocks, etc. For example, the ASN 8075, this belongs to Microsoft. So we don't want Microsoft scanning us, right? So the first thing we're going to block off is Microsoft. So here we can write a block rule exactly for 8075. But keep in mind, Microsoft, they don't only use Microsoft IP addresses to scan your malware and your different links. They also utilize the entire partner network. So they have data centers in different countries. They also use the Tor network to scan your links as well. So keep in mind, you might have to actually run through many times and then gain all of the IP addresses. We've actually gone through so many times, which we have pretty much all of their ASN numbers and also all of the IP ranges that they're using now already. You have to keep in mind there is Office 365 tenants for Singapore, I think in Europe and also in the US as well. So there's 3 major locations for Office 365, and they're using different IP ranges and locations to scan your links depending on which location you're from. So I think it's for cross-border data issues. So for example, in EU, maybe GDPR, they don't want to send the phishing link to the US, maybe, things like that. So that's why I think they utilize a local set of IPs for scanning the different email links. Also, I think just as a tip when implementing the firewall rules for Cloudflare, at the end, one thing that we like to do is implement a catch-all rule at the bottom of the WAF rules. We log all of the requests because this is really useful for debugging and also tracking who is actually connecting through after bypassing all of your rules. So if you're able to bypass step 1, step 2, and step 3 and get through all of the rules, usually you're a legitimate person or you're the intended target. So if you're the intended target, that's great. We have had cases where suddenly the intended target is for some reason using a Microsoft IP range. I don't know why. Maybe they utilize Microsoft for their connections out to the internet. Or we also had a case with Zscaler, the web proxy. It was blocking the Zscaler connections. So we can debug it. We can see that there's many connections from our C2 server coming from Zscaler. So we knew that we could whitelist that IP address so it can go through to our C2 servers at the end because we had these rules in place. If you don't implement this catch-all rule, then you can't see that there's actually loads of requests hitting your C2 server. So do recommend implementing the catch-all rule, but skip on everything. So the 000/0, and then the log all matching requests as well. Okay. And then also, so what does it look like, right? When we're blocking the bad guys, well, I wouldn't say the bad guys, but these are, I don't know, whoever is not our client is always the bad guy for me because I don't really want unauthorized people to be scanning my web servers and my C2 servers, right? We have, this random IP address from Germany, Ionos AS or whatever this is. It's just randomly scanning our website or doing something to us, but it hit the JS challenge, so immediately they can't see anything. They're stuck on the JS challenge. When we're running the workers as well, this is quite useful. You can implement workers in Cloudflare. This is a script that we set up a few years ago now. It's quite useful because what we can do is we can allow specific paths in code form so that whenever someone hits your web server, the Cloudflare network, it will run through the worker, and then if it matches specific paths, so let's say, for example, you have a specific path in your phishing link, then it will allow it to go through to the origin server. Or maybe you have a specific path that you use for your C2 server, so your HTTPS connections for your C2 command and control. Then you can also whitelist that layer as well. Parameters, maybe. So if you're using things like Goldfish or phishing solutions, you will have a tracking ID, right, at the end of all of your phishing links. If you allow specific parameters, then anyone that does not have that parameter in place, you can show them something else, right? So you can't see your C2 server anymore. I mean, they can't see your phishing server anymore. So you can whitelist specific parameters as well. Also headers as well. But what we also do here is, if it doesn't actually connect through all of the different phases, it will then go to and proxy a legitimate website. So you remember back in the day, we used to say, hey, you should categorize all of your domains. It should be a health category or a financial institution category because it's more trusted, right? If you proxy the entire website, it's better than you trying to clone a website and get the categorization. So we've also been able to utilize Cloudflare to actually just proxy the entire website. So here we have like many domains. We just randomly select a domain every time they connect to our web server. If they don't bypass all of the necessary controls to gain legitimate access to our server, they will instead be shown like a health domain. So I think we have like World Health Organization, some different health websites here as well. What it will do is it will pick randomly one to load and show the person every time. And then this is useful because if it ever goes into a scanning solution and someone is checking for they're checking what category your domain is, they will basically just see the health website. They won't be able to see your phishing websites, etc. So you will always keep the nice reputation on your domains as well. So note that you can also add a lot more advanced criteria. We're just doing the basic thing here. The processing order, the HTTPS request, it will go into the Cloudflare network. It will then usually be processing the WAF rules and then the worker rules, and then it will connect to your origin. So your origin is maybe a server that you've set up on the internet. You put the IP address into Cloudflare, and it will connect through to your origin server, right? But actually, you can make it a lot more advanced as well. So we used to like to use domain fronting because it allows us to use trusted websites for our C2 channels. So we like to connect domain fronting into the whole chain as well, and then make it connect to Cloudflare, and then go through all of the WAF rules and worker rules once again, and then maybe connect to a redirector before it goes to the origin server. A redirector, why? Because we can hide the origin server away from Cloudflare, so they can't see where our origin server is. But this was not very cost effective, so eventually we moved to using Cloudflare tunnels. When you're using the origin server and the redirector, you still have to expose your IP addresses to the internet and your service to the internet as well. Okay, you can use the Cloudflare IP address ranges to whitelist Cloudflare on your redirector and your origin server, but it was it was a lot of work. It wasn't really worth it. So we ended up using Cloudflare tunnels. We don't even have to buy those servers for the redirectors anymore. We can just directly connect our servers on-prem into the Cloudflare network, and then it will act as an origin, and then it will also go through. So if you're looking to save costs, not having to manage like 50 redirectors, then the Cloudflare tunnels works really well. So this is generally what the sandbox is. So if they're trying to access your link like you've given the user, basically if it's a sandbox trying to scan your solution, scan your exe, what they will see is this loading page on Cloudflare. I don't know, you must have seen it before when you're browsing different websites, right? They're trying to verify that you're not a bot. So basically it will keep scanning and it will check, make sure you're a legitimate person before it serves you the exe. So this is usually what the sandbox is. So they will never actually see the malware. But if you actually have a human connection, so let's say you have a real person connecting to the link, basically it will load the JavaScript in the browser, it will connect through, and then it will eventually serve the malware, right? Here we can see that we've got loads of Hong Kong IP addresses. This was just me testing. You can see there's a JS challenge, which is good because we're a human, so we can bypass it. But then the most critical part is in all of our C2 servers and all of our payload servers, we actually have web notifications. So on my phone or on my laptop, especially, I basically get an event where it says that someone's connected to the server, right? So we can see in the Apache weblog, there was a 404 here because it was just an example, but we can see that if someone actually connects through the entire chain, they're connecting from a real browser, so you have a human person investigating you, or maybe it's a person actually clicking on the link, then you will see there's a connection that goes through to the final endpoint. After we've implemented this whole chain, we've never actually seen any sandboxes connect to us anymore. So it works wonders for us. So we never have to deal with sandboxes anymore. We have had to deal with a few incident response people and maybe threat intel people because they're just quite eager to find our payloads. They're quite eager to connect to us all the time. Even this one, I uploaded it to VirusTotal a few weeks back. For some reason, even till today, I have someone trying to get this malware exe file that doesn't exist. So I think there are people out there actually looking at links, even a month later, they're still trying to get access to the payload. So, but in general, it works really well, and it's a good solution. For Microsoft ATP, the sandbox, whenever they're scanning the links, here you can see we're using Hong Kong Microsoft tenant. So that's why we get scanned from Singapore. But you can see, just based on the ASN number, it's blocked the access from Microsoft, so they can't scan the XE. So it's quite useful. Also, we have OVH and Ahrefs, like SEO people scanning us. It's managed to block it off completely, and they get a JS challenge, so at least they can't see what our website's doing. We don't want them to see what our website's doing. Virus Total, we uploaded it to Virus Total, like I just mentioned. You get loads of people trying to scan you and connect to you, but they all get the JavaScript challenge, so they never actually see what's on your website. None of these have actually made it through to our origin, so it means that we filtered them out at this point already. Occasionally, whenever we're doing these red teams, you might have the incident response team or the CSIRT. They found our C2 server, and they think, hey, we're going to try and hack you back or attack your server. And they try to run directory busting. Usually, that's the thing that we see the most, like directory brute forcing. Immediately, if they do directory brute forcing, Cloudflare is quite good at this. They block them off as like a DDoS attack. So you don't have to worry about people messing around with your server. You won't even notice it. You won't have any headaches. You won't even notice that they're doing it. So you don't have to worry about the blue team trying to be too funny here. So what other issues do we have during our deployments when we're doing red teams as well, right? We have had cases where we have had Opsec fails, I would say. We haven't been as clean and segregating all of the connections and different customers as much as we would have liked. We have reused different domains across multiple years for certain customers as well. And sometimes they can spot, oh, it's the red team because we've seen it before. These types of situations. We have had OPSEC issues with Cloudflare because in certain situations, they were leaking our country, etc. as well. And for some customers, it already gave an indicator that like, it's a red team and not a real threat actor. So usually when the blue team, they know it's a red team, they sit back and they don't worry too much, and we want to be realistic, so we always we try to not give them that false sense of security. Newly registered domains, less than a month. Usually we have customers which are blocking domains which are newly registered less than a month. So usually these are phishing domains if it's quite newly registered. If it's quite an old domain, it wouldn't be blocked anyways, right? So they have these rules in place, and sometimes our domains are not getting through because it's newly registered. We also get abuse complaints here and there as well from different registrars. So is it really because we're lazy and we're reusing all of these domains? Not necessarily, I would say. There are advantages as well, especially with expired domains over the many years. We've registered maybe like around 100 expired domains over the years now. So from legitimate businesses, legitimate websites, that we've just gathered over the many years that we're using for red teaming. But at the end of the day, we want to keep re-registering these domains year on year, so maybe like 5 to 10 years, and then it gains a really good reputation over the years. When we utilize these domains that have been registered for such a long time, it usually bypasses any filter. So that's why we're reusing these domains. It's not necessarily because we're lazy or we don't want to register new domains. It's because you don't come across newly reputable domains every single day. You can't just register new domains every day. You have to utilize these that you've collected over a long period of time. There's advantages, of course, as well. It's reputable. It saves domain costs. If you're renewing 100 domains every year, as opposed to registering new domains that you're just going to throw away, then you're saving money as well. And also, the domains are legitimate looking because you're using real expired domains. Some of the disadvantages, though, keep in mind, we haven't had these issues before, but I have heard of horror cases out there as well. So certificate transparency records, it exposes the subdomains. So if you're using like a old managed service provider's domain that you've taken over, well, not taken over, maybe you've just borrowed because they've let it expire, right? So you registered and you're using this managed service provider's domain, or maybe for the past 5 years now. And then suddenly, if you utilize like your customer name at the front because you want to make the phishing email more how should I say it? Like more relevant to the client, then suddenly you're exposing the customer's name. So that's why we usually don't use the customer's name anymore, because we don't want to accidentally expose our customer names to the threat intel community. And obviously, if it gets reported once in one project for some legitimate reason, then it can affect many other projects as well. So if you're using the same domain in maybe 2 ongoing red team projects, then if it gets reported on one customer, it can also affect the other customer, because if it hits a blacklist for like maybe it's suspicious on one web proxy, then suddenly it's suspicious in the other web proxy as well. And maybe you lose C2 connections in both environments. I think a lot of people building red teams, they always ask, what DNS provider or what name service provider are you using? The one that we like to use the most now is Cloudflare, because I'm not sponsored by Cloudflare, but we have used a lot of their products over the years. Why? Because Cloudflare, it's really good because they send whenever your domain is suspicious, someone likes to send a complaint to the registrar. Depending on the registrar, they handle it differently. Cloudflare, they like to send you directly the abuse complaint, and you can deal with it yourself. So they don't care about what the legal issues are or whatever. They send you the complaint, and then you legally have to respond to the complaint yourself. That's good for us because we're authorized red teamers, right? We're authorized by the customer. We can just ignore these complaints. But there is some issues. So in Cloudflare, a bit different to all of the other registrars. Usually, when you have the whois privacy guard, it hides your registration information, right? Or who you are, the person that registered the domain. The thing is with Cloudflare, it still exposes your location. So what do I mean? With all the other registrars, when you use the whois privacy guard, it will give you some generic registration information. But with Cloudflare, our Cloudflare account is in Hong Kong. So it says that it's protected, it's hidden information, but it's Hong Kong. So for one of our customers, they utilized us 3 years in a row. They knew that it's this red team over and over again. And then by the 3rd year, they see Cloudflare domain registered in Hong Kong, and they're trying to attack us. They immediately know it's the red team. So that sort of made it less realistic for that customer at that point in time. So that was one of the sort of Opsec mistakes that we had around Cloudflare, because at the time we didn't check and we didn't know that Cloudflare was showing out part of our account information to the customer as well. From Namecheap, Namecheap was also really good back in the day. You can work with their security and abuse teams. You can let them know that you're an authorized red team company. They can help whitelist your account. So every time they have abuse complaints, they will forward you the request, so they can do that. So Namecheap was quite good for a while until I met Cloudflare, and then I've been using Cloudflare ever since. There is some bad ones like a name silo and other ones. They will immediately just terminate your domain without even asking you. So that's going to be really bad if you're on a red team engagement. Suddenly, if they terminate your domain, then you lose all access, right? So usually I steer away from things like port-bun and name silo. So Cloudflare is quite good. They won't take down your domains. They keep your domains going, so you can feel relatively secure and not worry about it. ISPs, so people are looking for what VPS I should use for red teaming, right? We used to utilize a lot of Amazon and Azure in the UK. Why I don't use that, I'll explain in a moment now as well. I don't use too much DigitalOcean, but DigitalOcean is quite good for mass scanning. So I don't know if people have heard of the Axiom project, right? So if you're running maybe like 100 servers on DigitalOcean to do some vulnerability scanning, then it can be quite useful. And also for DigitalOcean, you can actually get access to a project manager or an account manager. The person will basically help communicate why you're doing the scanning, etc., and they let you do scanning from their VPSs. So DigitalOcean is quite good for that. Also, I utilize a lot of non-traditional type of VPS as well, because, for example, we know Lazarus Group are using some VPS in the US, right? So specific VPS companies. You can actually buy VPSs with those specific companies, and then you can get the same IP addresses as though you were simulating, let's say, the Lazarus Group. Or if you're simulating other APT threats, you can see what types of infrastructure they're using. You can buy from the same VPS provider, and then you can utilize that to simulate having those IP addresses as well. We usually don't keep any data with these types of small providers because there's a data risk. The smaller the provider, you're more likely, they might try to gain access to your customer data. So we never actually keep any data on the cloud. We keep everything on-premise now. Also, it provides more variety for the IP addresses. So, we might have around 20, 30 exit nodes, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. But it allows us to simulate having many, many IP addresses. The reason why we don't use Amazon and Azure anymore is there's just too many red teams using Amazon and Azure, where if someone sees Amazon and Azure, they just think, oh, it might be the red team again, So that's why we don't use Amazon and Azure as much anymore. I'll talk a little bit about generative AI now as well and how we've used it in our red team operations. Actually, it's actually quite a real issue, even just in Hong Kong quite recently. A guy was actually scammed out of around 500,000 euros. They were doing a deep fake attack with voice cloning and the sort of the face cloning. They spoke to the CFO and they asked them to transfer around 500,000 euros, right? And it actually happened. It's under investigation right now in Hong Kong. But generally, we've had projects where I think just 2 years ago, we had a project where we were working with a customer. They wanted us to basically clone the voice of an executive and prove that it can happen. Basically, we just crawled loads of videos off YouTube of the person speaking. We train the model based on their speaking, and then we can utilize their voice to speak as though we're that executive. So generally, how we do the voice cloning is we use this tool called RVC Web UI, so retrieval-based web conversion. It allows you to upload WAF files to the system. When you upload WAF files, you can then train the model. After you train the model, you can utilize the model and replace your voice. So basically, you can speak as you normally would, say anything you want. You upload it back into the system, put the model that you just trained, and then you can basically generate a WAF file. So you can see at the bottom there. Basically, it will be as though you're speaking with that person's voice. The only difficulty here is we were cloning I think it was a Switzerland Frenchish executive. They have a different accent at the end of their tone. So we don't have that accent when we're speaking. So, especially I've got a British accent, right? So I don't have the accents at the end of the words, the way that I'm speaking. So even after it replaces the voice, sometimes it doesn't clone the accents exactly. So it can sound a little bit weird as well. Yeah. But actually, before we were just speaking about having the pre-recorded voice clips, but actually you can utilize this in, let's say, Teams or Google Hangouts, etc. as well. There's a tool called Voice Changer Client. You can actually insert the model that you just trained and then output it on your MacBook, for example, or on your Windows machine, and then you can connect it into your Teams or your Google Hangouts or Zoom calls, and then you can basically speak as though you're using that person's voice as well. There is a little bit of a delay. There is around depending on the computational power, of course, right? But on a M2 Max machine, Apple MacBook, there is around a 30-second delay. So you'll have to act like it's lagging, on the call a little bit. But essentially it does work. If you're using maybe a faster graphics card or something, maybe it can be you can reduce the latency a bit more as well. I do have a voice cloning demo here. I don't know if it'll work, but from SpongeBob. I used SpongeBob in the end because I didn't want to use Biden or Donald Trump and I can't use my customers as well because NDA, right? So I utilized SpongeBob in this case. So
you hear that? I'm ready. I'm ready. Hey there, friends. It's me, SpongeBob SquarePants. I've got something fun to share. A voice coding demo for OFFENSIVEX Toy 24. Isn't that exciting? Oh, and how's the weather looking up there in Athens?
So, cloned SpongeBob's voice, replaced it with, actually, here I use ChatGPT to rewrite what I wanted to say in the sort of form of SpongeBob, and then translate it into the format, and then replace the voice into the actual clips as well, and then basically generated this demo. I would say you can speak like SpongeBob if you want on your voice conference calls in the future, but you can do that if you want. Deepfakes as well is quite a reality. There are tools, etc., for deepfakes as well. This is one that we've used before, the Deepfake Face Live project on GitHub. So you can check it out if you're interested. I would say we don't use deepfakes and voice cloning as much as I would like to. We do have occasionally social engineering calls. Let's say we're calling an IT help desk. Then we may try to change our voice because we don't want to reveal our own voice to the IT help desk and the service desk. So sometimes we replace our voice, but maybe not so much the deepfakes. Other times where we've utilized the generative AI is with the helping us to draft out the phishing landing pages. So it's quite useful. You can tell it, hey, code out a landing page for a phishing campaign. It helps us to draft out most of it, and then we can iterate on that landing page, and then it helps speed up the whole process. As red teamers, we're not really web front-end experts, so obviously we're really slow at drafting out landing pages, right? We can't make it look fancy, etc. But with the help of a little bit of a Copilot, we can make it have animations, etc. Right? And trust me, all of the people that were phishing, they love animations. When they see the animations, it's suddenly very authentic and legitimate. So whenever they see some animation, they'll click on the link. Here is quite a basic example, but you can always iterate on this and make it more and more relevant to the phishing campaign as well. As I said, making loads of animations is also very useful because it makes it look more legitimate. Other cases where we've utilized the generative AI is with the writing phishing emails. So when you write phishing emails, you get a bit fatigued. You write phishing emails all the time. You don't know how to word it in the right manner for the right environment. Here, we can basically utilize Copilot to help us draft out the phishing email as well. So we tell it to help us write the email. I'm the IT security team at a certain corporation. I want them to do certain things and click on a link, right? They basically help you generate out the email. You don't even have to think as much anymore. You can edit the email a bit more to make it fit your customer. But then basically it saved us a lot of time. Previously it might have taken a few hours for us to perfect our email, but now we have the most of the skeleton ready, and it saves us so much time in our engagements as well. And even more useful is it can translate the phishing emails. So we have customers in different countries. They might use Spanish, Japanese, French, German, loads of different languages. So we have to translate it to many languages. Here, I told it to translate to Spanish. I don't know how accurate it is. I don't speak Spanish, but I have it in Spanish now. And usually, I would say the generative AI, it takes into the context of the local country a lot better than the, let's say, the Google Translate. Usually, when we're doing the translation, let's say I want to fish someone in, let's say, Costa Rica or something, right? I can tell it to use the local dialect or the local Spanish of Costa Rica, and then it will try to make it sound like a Costa Rican email, right? So these types of situations as well. Also, I just spoke about it yesterday with some of the people here as well. So with generative AI, it's always on the cloud, right? It's always OpenAI or Microsoft. You're uploading all of your data to the cloud, right? Well, not necessarily. We use a lot of offline models as well. So a great tool that we utilize is Ollama, the offline LLM models, with especially Llama 3, 5.3, Mistral, and Gemma. These are really good models. You can download onto your device, run it offline, and then basically you can utilize an offline sort of chat GPT. Another thing that we found really useful for these types of tools is we utilize a tool called Anything LLM. You can connect it to your Ollama model that I just mentioned offline. Basically, Anything LLM, you can insert any document, PDF, Word doc, Excel file, and you can ask it questions about the document. We have had many cases. Let's say you're on a red team project, you're on the internal network, you're reading through all of the documentation, but then suddenly it's in Spanish or French or something, right? And you might not necessarily read Spanish or French, so you can tell it to summarize the document and translate it to English. So here I've got the X-Force Threat Intel Index on PDF. You can basically just insert it into anything LLM and then ask it questions about the document. Here I told it to summarize and give me the top 10 facts to be aware of, and then it's basically just summarize whatever the document's talking about. I think it's pretty accurate because the third point here is talking about the Microsoft Exchange Server deployment breakdown, and then there was exactly this, this reference inside the PDF. So it does seem to work quite well. We have had cases where maybe we have documentation on network diagrams or inventory lists, etc., for specific organizations. We can upload it into the offline LLM and the anything LLM, and then basically it can read through and you can ask it questions like, what are the IP ranges for the SCADA network, or what are the IP ranges for the Swift network, or how can we access the Swift network? Do we have to go through a specific jump box or certain machines, right? So there are these types of situations where you can ask them these questions and it can speed up the engagement as well. If you're reviewing documents, that's probably the most time tedious process in all of our engagements. So that's why we can utilize this to speed up this process as well. You can also translate it, like I just mentioned. So here it's translating to Greek. I don't read Greek, so but here's just an example. You can translate it to whatever language you want, and you can read it in your own native language as well. So final part now, we're almost done. I'm going to talk a little bit about smaller red team infrastructure. There's probably people out here in today's audience. You're running your own red team. You want to know how are we setting up our infrastructure for our red teams now, especially from the internal side. So not necessarily the customer-facing side, but how are we sorting out our own access controls, our own segregation of the different network parts. So we'll talk about that a little bit here as well. We utilize a tool called Tailscale, a software-defined WAN solution, as the key core technology of our access control in our red team infrastructure. So I mentioned a lot about Cloudflare and the C2 servers connecting back on-prem. So you'll see like Site 1, Site 2, and the VPS sites. Site 1 and Site 2 are on-premise sites in different data centers. Cloudflare will then basically, well, it doesn't connect in. We connect out to the Cloudflare tunnel. But basically, we can connect out for our C2 servers, our phishing servers, our landing pages. We can basically connect it out to Cloudflare. We also have Site 2, which maybe have different servers as well. But then we can basically utilize Tailscale to create rules so that different people within your organization, let's say I have the red team or the reporting people, they can have different access to different servers. They won't have access to everything. So in a traditional network, it's maybe you sit in a certain IP range and then you can access certain servers. Here it's not, it's more identity-based. So this is just how we've implemented it in our occasion. So maybe in Site 2, I have the reporting system, and we only want certain red team operators to have access to the reporting system. So we can have a rule in Tailscale's access control list to allow only certain people to have access to the reporting system. For our red teams, we had many cases where, well, not many cases, maybe 1 or 2 times where it was just enough justification for us to create backup servers as well. So for the C2 servers, if you suddenly lose all of the data on the C2 server because a server goes down or something, then you lose all of that data for that red team. And the customer will ask you, so what were you doing at this time? Or did you run this command on this machine at this certain point in time? If you lose all of that data, then suddenly it's catastrophic for us. So that's why now we have backup servers for all of the C2. Maybe it backs up 4 times a day to the NAS server. So it will basically just back up to the servers as well. So the C2 servers, the landing pages, all of the websites, has all of the logs as well. And then also we have offsite backups as well. So we always help our clients review their backup solutions and their backup strategies. So when we tell them you should have an offsite backup as well, so that's why we're also doing the offsite backup. So what's good about Tailscale is it's it's like a transparent it bridges different sites together. So basically, I don't even need to connect the 2 sites together in different data centers. Essentially, if you connect the 2, if you have Tailscale in both sites going, you can basically transparently connect to the other server and back up your data to the other server as well in another site. So that's just how we're doing it. We also have loads of exit nodes. So what are exit nodes? It's essentially nodes that you can pick in Tailscale, which will allow you to choose any IP address you want to use to connect to the internet. We've basically set up around 20 to 30 exit nodes now in different countries. So like whenever our red team's doing the projects, they can select different exit nodes so they don't have to worry about exposing their home IP address or their Hong Kong IP address or their Singapore IP address or what have you to the customer. Sometimes it looks really bad if you're doing a red team and suddenly they find your home IP address, right? So, so that's why we have loads of exit nodes now, and they can force their traffic to go through the exit node. We don't use commercial VPN providers because I don't trust the commercial VPN providers. So we always implement our own VPSs, and then we only send our data through those VPSs to over TLS, right? And then maybe another VPS site for utility servers. So these usually are servers that we just run for a duration of time because we don't want to run it on our own machines. Maybe like we're doing some vulnerability scanning, or we're doing some analysis, or we're testing malware, or we're trying to compile malware. Then we have loads of utility servers that the team can use as well. Basically also access control based. So certain members of the team can connect to certain servers to generate malware or generate certain payloads and test their payloads as well. So we have these utility servers there as well. Also, another case, we also have the Dropboxes and the DMZ as well. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Dropboxes. For physical security engagements, we might have like a Raspberry Pi with like a GSM connection. So basically like your SIM card internet connection via one channel, and then we'll have the LAN port where we connect it into the customer's network, right? So we break into the organization, we walk in, we get into a conference room, we hide underneath the desk, we plug in the LAN cable, and then we need to be able to connect out to the internet via the GSM connection. It's quite useful in Tailscale because it allows you to directly connect transparently into the network, and then basically you can connect out to your Dropbox as well. And you can also utilize the access control list to control who can get access to the Dropboxes as well. So that's quite useful for us. Yep. Why do I not use a regular VPN? Because obviously, over the past couple of years, you've just seen Checkpoint, Cisco, Global Protect, all of these solutions. There's just CVEs every day. You're going to deal with more problems than you're solving with these types of VPN solutions. What if you don't trust Tailscale? All right, so if you don't trust Tailscale to act as a coordination server, you can also deploy your own Headscale server, which is a open source version of the Tailscale. There's a link at the bottom as well. Basically, using Headscale, you can run your own coordination server, and then you don't have to worry about Tailscale trying to override your access control list, or they're trying to open up your network if they're not happy one day. So at least you can take control of the entire chain yourself. There are other SD-WAN technologies as well, aside from Tailscale. It's just we've used Tailscale because it's good so far. But there's also NetBird, Zero Tier, NetMaker, and Cloudflare. There's other solutions as well out there. Of course, I've heard people use Zscaler and other solutions, but we've just utilized Tailscale because they were they're quite good, they're quite user-friendly as well, so that's why we use them. So just a quick summary. Cloudflare works great in blocking scanners. Even as a bare minimum, if you implement the Cloudflare, you can probably block off a lot of the attacks and from the incident response people. So keep in mind, try and use Cloudflare if you haven't already. Phishing still works. If you implement this, trust me, you'll get in. Your phishing links will get through. You won't have any trouble with your phishing emails getting into the user's inbox. I can share more tips offline if anyone wants to talk about phishing. We have good ways to track our phishing emails to see whether it gets into the inbox. Also, generative AI is quite useful. After it's come out, it's quite useful for speeding up our operations and the drafting of different phishing campaigns, etc. And Tailscale has helped us actually implement a lot of the access controls and our red team infrastructure over the years as well.